Hi, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuhu. I am Rama Kamsa Usman and I am your reporter for today's video. Before proceeding to my final discussion, I have here the game entitled Guess Me. This game will name Guess Me, and I will present some pictures and some clues that you will get the correct answer by basing the clues that I will be giving. Okay, here is the first one. It is a religion that believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just answer it by yourselves. And if your answer is Islam, then you get the correct answer. The aggregating of people living together in a more or less ordered community. If your answer is society, then you get another correct answer. And the last one, the way in which one acts or conduct oneself, especially towards others. If your answer is behavior, then you get the correct answer. Alright, let's proceed to our formal lesson on Islamic society, values, and behaviors. Expect that we are talking about Islamic and then the Arabs people's life. Here is my learning outcomes. At the end of the lesson, the student should be able to identify Islamic society values and behavior. Explain the values, behavior, and the society of the Arabs. Relate the Islamic behavior to the other cultural behavior. Let's proceed. The Arabs came from a tribal society, and in an early years of the empire, even their city were controlled and organized by the tribes, but the town had enough governmental organization to operate elaborate water system and to maintain roads and fortification. In time, the tribe lost some of their power and the towns became like those of other ancient culture. The tradespeople live in the specific quarters centered on the main mosque. And there is some evidence that they were organized into something like craft guild, but we know almost nothing about those organizations. The towns provided the major market for wares and products and produced most of the manufacturer's goods. Long-distance trades brought in their goods by caravan and stored them in a warehouse provided by the central government. After paying a duty on the cargoes, they sold their goods to the local townspeople. Wherever there was a caravanserai is an inn for the caravans. The long-distance trade was kept separated from the local market, which was controlled by the town's own merchant. Transactions were carried out by means of financial instruments that are still used in the world trade. For example, Arab merchants used the letter of credit to transfer funds from one end of the empire to the other. A merchant in one city would pay the bearer of a letter to credit a sum of money in full confidence that it would be paid over to his agent in another city. So long as there was a stable flow of goods in both directions, the principal merchants could assume that the accounts would be balanced. The Arabs also invented a kind of promissory note that evolved in the modern bank check. In fact, the word check is probably derived from an Arabic word. In Islamic society was more tolerant of ethnic diversity than either Byzantine or European society. The Arabs intermarried with the local population and migrants. People constantly added to the mix because of most caliphs were the son of slaves women or the low-born wives of their royal sires. There was little room for the emphasis or racial purity that was so common in Constantine and in the Germanic kingdoms. The Caliph family serves as the model for ordinary families in the society. The Quran permitted Muslims to have 4 wives and accepted that keeping of slaves concubines and practice. Only wealthy men could afford to keep several wives and concubines. But most men above the lowest class had at least 1 wife and 1 concubine. So the typically Muslim household was large with the wives and concubines. All their slaves and their household slave most of family had at least 1 or 2 slaves. Also, Muslims' household were ruled by males, just as the desert tribes had been. Life in this desert depend on the cohesiveness of the group, and that in turn dependent on the characters of the leader. The quality of his leadership both either honor or shame to the tribe and to himself, and influence the degree of respect the tribe commanded for other tribes. Islamic society continued to ascribe high values to the honor of man. Status is determined in every respect, one's success in trade and his chances of marrying well, because every slighter injury was challenged to a man's honors that had to be avenged. Feud was academic in Islamic society. In Islamic law, women and men had virtually the same rights, but in everyday life, man played a dominant role. An improper approach to a man's wife or female servant was damaging to his status. It was injurious for someone even to mention the name of man's wife in public. So women were closely protected and wore a veil whenever they left their home. Also, even in our society, as a Muslim, women wore hijab or veil for us to be protected and for us to be identified as a Muslim. Within the household, all women and children live in separate quarters called the harem. Several competing families live in the harem, with each woman vying with the others to win favor with the head of the household for herself and for her children. Mothers instructed their daughters in the household art and in sex to help them win the favor with their husband. Whenever influence the woman had over the head of the household was exercised within the confines of the harem. Also, the inaccessibility of a woman, may have contributed to the commonness of homosexual relations among Muslim men. Islamic society was tolerant of homosexuality although foreigners found it scandalous. Although the percentage of men who were exclusively homosexual was probably no greater than in other society, many Muslim men who ordinarily had relations with women also had occasional relations with men. Perhaps the society's liberal attitudes toward racial and ethnic differences allowed men and women opportunities to rise from poverty and a lowly status to wealth and power. In the case of man, the Islamic aristocracy was less exclusive than its counterparts in the Byzantine Empire and European. European men often took wives and concubines from family less well placed than themselves, and their children enjoyed all the advantages of the household. Moreover, the educational system gave some talented young men an opportunity to enter the bureaucracy. Others could grow rich through communist and Islamic society was a society of self-made men. And that's all for my report. Thank you very much for listening.